Good morning, guys. How are we doing? It's a wonderful Tuesday here. We just had some rain yesterday, so can't go out and cut the grass today. We'll have to wait another day or two or so to get that done, so that stinks. But we here. It's another day indoors. It's my kind of thing, I guess. Now it's my kind of thing. Kind of going stir crazy here a little bit, but we'll get through it. We still have 5 or so weeks that we're going to be learning. 5 weeks is nothing to stay inside and not go out and see the world, go to the stores, hang out with friends. Nothing for me because I've got math. Today, we're going to take a look at identifying some sides for trig, and what I mean by identifying sides is when I say the word opposite or adjacent or hypotenuse, we need to absolutely be sure which sides I'm talking about of these triangles, because trig relies heavily, very, 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 very heavily on me knowing, well, what is opposite or adjacent or hypotenuse to make the ratios that I'm going to use for trig. So for me, right now, the best place for us to start, in my opinion, is just with understanding how we identify these sides and labeling them. Just getting some practice, getting a feel for which sides are which at this point. So what I mean by that is, let's say that I have a triangle that's something like this. Okay? It's a right triangle. One thing you're going to notice for trig is we're going to use right triangles all the time. That's where we use trig. Spoiler alert, though, we will find out how to do trig stuff to triangles that aren't right. It's a pain, but we can do it. It's great still. So right triangle. I have 2 options for angles that I could be talking about here. I could be talking about this angle up top, or I could be talking about this angle down here at the bottom. Any of these 2 that aren't the right angle I could be talking about. And the reason that we're not going to use the right angle for this stuff is because my trig functions, they kind of blow up with these right angles. We get things like undetermined or undefined. We'll get things like 1 or 0. The right angle isn't used in trig. We use all the other ones, but we have to have a right triangle to kind of make sense of a lot of this stuff. So here, everything we say is going to be based off of a particular angle. In this case, here's the angle. And I'm going to use a Greek letter, theta, that's T-H-E-T-A, to represent this unknown angle, all right? So this is the angle I'm talking about right here. What side of this triangle would we call the hypotenuse? Good. That's this side right here. This is the hypotenuse. I know that that's the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse always is opposite the right angle. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe I'll make these dotted lines a little bit darker. There we go. The hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle. Now, if I were looking at this triangle and I said, what side is opposite the angle theta? Would it be this one or this one? Which side is opposite the angle theta? Well, the one down here is opposite the angle theta. And this would then be the adjacent side right here. So we have our opposite, our adjacent, and our hypotenuse in reference to this theta. Now, because we're on the internet here and you're not really taking notes, you can just kind of watch. Watch what happens if I move that theta that I'm talking about now to the other spot. Maybe this was the spot that my theta was. How do these things change? Well, the hypotenuse is still where I said it was because it's opposite the 90 degrees. But now this side down here, this is my adjacent side now. And this side over here is now my opposite. Opposite. See how it changed? So depending on the angle that we're referring to, our opposite and adjacent spots, they kind of flip-flop. This is why it's very, very, very important to know which angle are we talking about, and then that's kind of our reference point for these words, opposite and adjacent. Because if I just told you, well, look at the opposite side, but I didn't give you this, you have no idea which side is the opposite. It could be either one of the two. I need to give you some reference point. So in that case, this was our reference here. Now let's do another quick example of this to see what I mean again. Maybe make it a little bit of a different problem. Let's take a look at this one here. Let's label all three sides. Start off, the easy one is the hypotenuse, right? You should see that the hypotenuse is right here. This diagonal line going down. Why? Because it's opposite the 90 degrees. This is my hypotenuse. Which side is opposite the angle that I gave you? The opposite side to the theta is the one over on the right. Opposite. And which side is adjacent to that angle theta? That's this top one. That's my adjacent side. We could do this for all of our triangles. All of our right triangles, rather, because if it's not a right triangle, we don't really have a hypotenuse. But any triangle that I draw that's a right triangle, I could give you an angle and I could have you clarify which side is opposite, which side is adjacent. And the reason this is going to be important, once again, is to prepare us for our trig functions. Because eventually I'm going to ask you maybe what's the sine of this angle, or what's the cosine of this angle. And it's got a lot to do with understanding what the heck these things are. And we're going to see that starting next week. I'm going to start getting into some of these trig ratios. So make sure that by the end of this week, any triangle that I draw, you can label opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. You know which ones are which for the angle that I give. Let's do one last example just for the sake of doing one. If you think you got this, excellent. Worksheet will be posted tomorrow morning. You'll have the remainder of the week to finish it up. So here is another one. Go like this. It's an ugly triangle, but it'll get the job done. And the theta that I'm going to put is going to be right here. Again, opposite the 90 degrees, that's our hypotenuse. Opposite the angle is opposite. And right next to the angle is adjacent. So this side here on the left, this is my adjacent side. The top side is my opposite side. And of course, the hypotenuse is still the hypotenuse. Get used to naming those, get used to thinking of things in that way. Stay frosty. I'm out.